Hi, I'm Maria Ressa, and we're at the World Justice Forum in Warsaw. With me is Anne Applebaum, whose most recent book, Autocracy, Inc., goes beyond and tells us what actually is happening. Like, how have we moved into this post-Cold War world that has damaged democracy? What's happening?
So the book describes a network of dictatorships. It's not all dictatorships. It's not everyone in the world. And they aren't people, they aren't organizations, they aren't political parties who necessarily share an ideology. What they do share is a conviction that the language and the ideas of democracy and of the rule of law and of human rights are a threat to them. Yeah. And so we're talking about Russia, about China, about Iran, about Venezuela, about Zimbabwe. I write about it's countries all over the world,
right,
who have identified those ideas as a threat and who seek to undermine them. And they seek to undermine them mostly because they're interested in defeating their own political opponents at home, whether it was Alexei Navalny's anti-corruption movement or whether it was the Hong Kong democracy movement or the
right,
Iranian women's rights movement. But they also came to understand that in order to win these arguments, they needed to to work globally. And so the book is partly about that. It's about their development of an authoritarian narrative, how it spreads. In the case of of Russia, their use of military force and actions as well to undermine what they perceive of as a democratic or a Western alliance.
In the old days, it almost felt like every accountability story journalist did ultimately came down to corruption. But now it feels, and you point this out, right? It's like the growth of these types of authoritarians or dictatorships are deeply connected to corruption.
Oh, they exist for corruption. I mean, they are, the leaders of Russia, the leaders of China, these are billionaires. We don't know how they're billionaires or why or how their money came to be or where it is necessarily, but we know that they're very wealthy and the people around them are also extremely wealthy. And this, of course, gives them a different kind of influence in the democratic world than the dictators of a previous era once had. I know that they can buy people, and they also are attractive to people. So don't underestimate the attraction that kind of wealth has for, for the young Donald Trumps of the world. People just starting out in the real estate business in New York. I mean, they would see the Russian oligarchs as something to admire.
Right.
And so they've had an effect not only in their own societies, but also in the democratic world.
And ultimately, that corruption, the kind of power and money that they have, what does it do to rule of law?
If you have power and money and the will to undermine the rule of law, then what's in your way? So it's a these are if we're talking about there are autocracies and then there are declining democracies, but if we're talking about autocracies, I mean, these are countries where they already control, there is no rule of law, there's instead rule by law, meaning that the people in charge get to decide what the law is. And there is an argument, it's funny, I heard it made once by a Ukrainian friend, that it's precisely because of the need to steal and then keep your money that leaders in declining democracies begin to undermine the rule of law. In other words, if you have begun to use your political system for personal gain, then you have a big interest in shutting down journalism, in ending the whatever government inspectors there are, in controlling the courts. All of those efforts to undermine those institutions very often begin with politicians who just want to steal.
So I'm both Filipino and American, and to see this happening twice, we lived through it in the Philippines with Duterte. We had a strong fixed 6-year term, and the only reason it ended was because the military and police maintained the rule of law. But to watch this happen in the United States, like how is it possible? The Philippine Constitution is patterned after the US, but to have the executive not have a legislature be able to check. Why is this happening?
This is in the US, it's happening because the Republican legislature is refusing to check the president. I mean, it has the right to check the president. In the American system, the Congress determines how money is spent, and including taxes, what taxes are are imposed. A tariff is a tax. So there is no reason why the president should be able to randomly declare tariffs on whoever he wants, or to raise them or lower them according to his mood or according to whether the leader of a particular country is nice to him. I mean, that's actually anathema to our system. It's not supposed to work that way.
Or even bombing Iran without the congressional. I mean, aren't these impeachable offenses?
These, of course, they're impeachable offenses. I mean, the military question is a little more fraught because we've had a decline in Congress's control over military power that goes back decades. So that's actually that's been undermined for a long time. But the tariffs is new. I mean, the president is actually using a kind of fake emergency to give himself the power to declare these tariffs. But this is something that Congress should be able to block, but they don't want to. So our Constitution was never written, well, sorry, I should say it differently. Our Constitution was written on the assumption that the players would play their roles.
Do their tasks.
You know, that they would do their jobs.
Yeah.
You know, the Congress would do its job, the Supreme Court would do its job. And when that doesn't happen, this is when you have a breakdown.
The role of big tech, these American tech companies that in our part of the world has really wrought havoc on democracy. What role is it playing now?
Well, this is where I'm going to start asking you questions, because the role of big tech is critical, because you know, as you are the person who's explained this better than almost anybody else. What the algorithms of technology have done is they've enabled the fracturing of public space. They've made it much more difficult for people to organize, but also even to understand what's going on. They've made it hard for people to know what's true and what's not true. And they've undermined the role of people who do spend their time going out in the world and collecting information and presenting it to people, whether in the form of journalism or in the form of government reports or inspections. And so the fundamental problem isn't particular people or particular autocrats. It's this underlying system and structure which has infected the United States perhaps worse than anywhere else, but you can see the impact all over the world. I mean, I think the reason for the decline in the rule of law around the planet is the same. And this is where I wanted to ask you, because you have spent more time thinking about this than almost anybody I know, and you have worked a lot on what the alternatives are. So, is it enough just to do really good communication strategies to reach people in different forms of media and social media, or is there something else that we should be doing to recreate some sense of shared public space?
We've done that. Like Rappler was set up in 2012, and we lived on social media. And then from 2012 to around 2014, it was actually, they didn't have the same algorithms. Remember, Sheryl Sandberg was brought in 2008, and then she began, it was really around 2014 where we began to see information operations and much more aggressive algorithms. A lot of it for making money for the tech platforms. The destruction of democracy, that was a byproduct. The main goal was keep you scrolling, which means more revenues, the surveillance capitalism business model. And we didn't even have a name for that business model until 2019. That was when Shoshana Zuboff wrote Surveillance Capitalism. I lived through it because I could see the data on a daily basis, minute per minute. And from 2012 to 2016, we had a mood meter. We had a mood meter before the emoji of Facebook, right? So in 2012, from 2012 to 2016, the most voted mood in the Philippines was happy. Filipinos were happy. And then all of a sudden in 2016, when Rodrigo Duterte began working with Facebook, that fundamentally shifted almost overnight with the campaign.
Sorry, you say he worked with Facebook. Explain what happened, because I'm not sure everybody knows.
Yeah, so Facebook aggressively, again, like, did they plan this? I watched it, the strands come together. Katie Harbath was then in the Philippines. They offered, as they did with Donald Trump later that year, they offered to work with the candidates. But I don't think they even realized that by doing that, they were compromising integrity, information integrity. And Rodrigo Duterte worked with them, his campaign worked with them. That was when we began to see what we later called information operations our first report came out in August of 2016, and it was about, it was just disinformation. I watched how the radicalization, my second book is called From Bin Laden to Facebook. And I was talking about, like, in 2011, there were jihadists in the Philippines who were calling for a global jihad. Come to the Philippines for a global jihad on YouTube. So we were tracking this, and the radicalization that led to men like the Bali bombers, for example, has been unleashed online now to the public, making politics a gladiator's battle to the death, right? That kind of extremism. Polarization was one algorithm that every social media platform used, which was a friend of friend algorithm. So how do they grow? I will recommend friends of friends to you, and they found by A/B testing it that you would be more prone to grow your network, and in growing your network, you grow their platform. Every single social media platform used this. And then what we saw that shift in the Philippines, because we had the data. In 2016, if you were pro-Duterte, friends of friends algorithm, you move further right. If you're anti-Duterte, you move further left. And over time, that chasm grew. I mean, you can replace Duterte with Trump, with Orban, with, you know, we've done this. I think our most recent report, the way we survived the Duterte administration was to take what we used to do as investigative journalists and splinter it off as a separate company, because the Duterte administration essentially tried to shut us down by telling our advertisers to stay away. We dropped 49% of our advertising revenue within the first 4 months of the shutdown order on Rappler. Anyway, why am I saying that? Because I'm absolutely convinced, based on the data, that no news organization can survive on the design of the social media platforms. And that's not just that, right? We saw active choking of news sites beginning in January of 2023. Meta was straightforward. They just choked traffic to news sites. And that caused anywhere from a 50% to an 85% drop in traffic to news sites all around the world. 2023, when we were having 74 elections in 2024, right? And then Google, with generative AI, also began to, now when you get Google, you get the generative AI summary up top. They no longer send traffic to news sites. So traffic to news websites decreased even as generative AI came on, and then what Cory Doctorow called the enshittification of the internet. Like, you can't tell fact from fiction even more, right? I don't know if you saw, like, the video of Donald Trump and the three men behind him, his cabinet secretaries, has now been redone by generative AI. And while it's funny, it's also scary, because I've had deep fakes done. The Pope has had deep fake. I'm sure you have a deep fake. I have a deep fake selling crypto. I've never sold crypto. I have a deep fake telling people with diabetes to throw away their insulin. Don't do that. So we're getting to this stage where I think it's not just democracy. I don't think journalism will survive. So what we did was, 3 years ago, we began looking at how can we have information integrity? What's a different version of the internet? And it was actually France and Germany that led the way forward here, the UK as well at some point.
So you used work done in France and Germany?
Yes. President Macron I was the only non-French in a 6-member team that he called it État Généraux. He gave money to talk to the French people about what you think about AI. Generative AI and AI, right? We did 8 months. We came up with 15 proposals, and one of those is open source, decentralized, end-to-end encrypted. We need to protect ourselves online because data privacy is a myth, and it is the worst in America. Sorry.
But tell me about
what we built.
Tell me what you built.
Okay, so the Matrix Protocol is something that was built by a UK company called Element in 2014. Who uses it? The German government. All their websites are on it. The German military, German intelligence, the French government, all their websites are on it. The Taiwanese use the Matrix Protocol for consultation. And what we did is we began to think of a federation of news organizations instead of like Blue Sky, which is a social media derivative, right? Modeled after social media. Instead of thinking like, I will get you and you and you and you, why not bring the community of news organizations into the Matrix protocol? Rappler has 15 million uniques. What about South Africa? What about Brazil? Our MVP was Rappler. We rolled it out the end of 2023. We stress tested it during our last elections, and we were able to, what does it do? Real people can have real conversations.
So it's a form of online conversation.
It's a safe virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
Because right now we have outsourced the internet to private companies. And those private companies are driven by profit. And that drive for profit, the business model, is toxic, not just for journalists, but for information integrity.
And how does your system work differently?
It's a federation of news organizations. So this is still a dream, but what we do have is an MVP with Rappler. And then our Indonesian partner is about to start building. We have a South African partner and a Brazilian partner. The countries to me that, we've lived through, I always joke, with Brazil, we moved from hell to purgatory and we don't want to go back to hell, right? So what we're trying to do is, in Rappler, what are the new business models for news? And we found 3 by creating your own data lake, by moving away from Silicon Valley's ideas of what the public sphere is. How do we create a public interest tech stack? And that was the exercise we went through. We built it. And here's the hard part. You don't really make money at it. This should have been something governments, democratic governments, did, the same way they would build a library or create a park, right? We're being pushed into tech spaces that by design manipulate us. And as a byproduct, kill democracy. Sorry, it is true. But I have all the data. Which country do you want? I will give you the data. When I wrote How to Stand Up to a Dictator, I wrote double the number of pages. I wrote 400 pages. And then my editor said, Maria, 400 pages. Do you want the person to read it cover to cover or know everything you know?
Okay, then let's finish on the 2-sentence version of what it is that you've proposed and created and how it works.
It's a public tech stack, right? The technologists would know that tech stacks are how, it's kind of like pushing servers together. So it's the technology that would allow news organizations to be able to create, it's called Federation, but it's like Mastodon, if you know that. But the problem with Mastodon is when you go on Mastodon, you have to
over
go,
2 sentences.
Oh my God, it's hard. And you know the hard part? A funder for journalism doesn't care about the tech. And a tech funder despises journalism.
Right. So tell us, but essentially you're talking about creating a technology that would allow newspapers to survive.
News organizations. So it's a public interest tech stack that would allow news organizations to have public debates without people being insidiously manipulated for
that makes
profit.
Sense. And what's it called?
It's the Matrix Protocol chat app is what we did. So all we did is we built on top of existing tech for a news service. So all you have to do for The Atlantic is log into The Atlantic, and then you can be part of a federated system. If Sam follows The Atlantic, Bob follows Rappler. Sam and Bob can talk to each other without our news organizations ever sharing their data. It's restoring data privacy again.
Then that's what we should all adopt.
Oh, I love you, Anne. Wait, my last question to you is, this feels like such a tenuous moment, right? Like we have a United States that can essentially pull us all into a fascist world. Where are you finding hope?
I find hope by doing things, by writing, by talking to people, by being part of organizations.
Is it enough?
when people, well, I don't think hope is something that can ever come from outside or from something somebody says. I think that, there are a lot of people who are now engaged in politics and in public debate in a way that they weren't before, especially younger people, and they will create the hope. So thank you. I've been speaking with Maria Ressa at the World Justice Forum here in Warsaw.